River pedestrian bike bridge is moving forward. Today, I talk one-on-one with Katie Zimmerman of Charleston Moves for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, sponsored by Rebellion Roads. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Katie Zimmerman with Charleston Moves. Welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups for this interview, sponsored by Rebellion Roads.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Needless to say, you are the executive director of Charleston Move, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates for, obviously, bicycle, pedestrian, and public infrastructure policies across Charleston County. So tell me, Katie, what's new? What's now with Charleston Moves?
A lot. We've got updates to the Ashley River Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge, and actually the construction laydown yard is. I think it's set. I've been wandering out there and looking at it. And then this week, Charleston County Council voted to submit a planning grant application to USDOT to try for some planning funds for the Better Northbridge project. So wow. Two of our really big priorities are moving along.
Absolutely. And I want to get over to Better Northbridge in just a second, but I want to go obviously to what you talked about just a second ago, and that is the Ashley River pedestrian bike path. Needless to say, this is coming from Channel 5, but the City of Charleston's Traffic and Transportation Committee met recently to further discuss their plans for a project that has been in the works for a while. Last month, Charleston Mayor Wayne Cogswell presented two design plans to the committee for how the Ashley River pedestrian bridge should connect to the peninsula. So let me ask you, Katie, what plans from the mayor did the Charleston Moves organization adopted?
Well, we don't adopt any of them, but the Traffic and Transportation Committee, they ended up at that recent meeting, they voted to unanimously as a committee to support the mayor's proposal to, and I don't want to overcomplicate things. Basically, he has a design idea to, on the downtown side, so the eastern landing of the new bridge, he wants to put in what almost looks like a little roundabout for people on bikes and foot, and then connect that, have a connection coming off of that, going under the existing bridges up to Brittlebank Park, and then thankfully connecting to the slip lane and to Lockwood Drive to get people to the medical district as well. So that proposal, it's a good, in my opinion, it's a good compromise to do what the mayor has wanted to do. The new mayor, he's been there a year now, what Mayor Cogswell wanted to add to the project, while also he was willing to add back in what was very important to us, which was a direct connection to the medical district. So I think it's a good compromise.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. Obviously, Mayor Cogswell has been in office for a year, but then, of course, a lot of people online saying, hey, this was all John Tecklenburg's plan, who was the previous Charleston mayor. So how does John Tecklenburg's plan matches with William Cogswell's plan for this particular bridge?
Yeah, I think so. And Mayor Tecklenburg, I mean, he was amazing with this project. He really had it as a priority and wanted to make sure it was going to happen. So yes, nearly everything that has come up to this point with the project, that was thanks to Mayor Tecklenburg's leadership on it. So how these two designs sort of align between the previous mayor and the current mayor is basically that direct connection to the medical district. So, and it also gets a little complicated because, you know, the project was awarded a federal grant back in 2019. And that was after, you know, we had worked with the city, who worked very hard to submit federal grants 3 years in a row. And that third year was when it got selected. So when that federal grant came through, there was one design on this eastern landing that was in the grant application as sort of a conceptual proposal. And that connection to the medical district it's changed over the years because it's a design build contract. So that means you can still be designing it as it's starting to be constructed. And design build contracts are generally supposed to be more cost efficient.
So how much will this project actually cost now with all of these changes to the design?
That's a great question. So before the changes, it was at well, I that's not fair to say. I think at this point now, and again, all these complications, the cost of the project is 92 million, from what I understand.
Okay.
However, that does not include the cost of this little roundabout proposal.
Mm,
So even though the roundabout would be physically part of the project,
right.
as far as funding and design and permitting goes, it's technically separate from the project.
I see.
So the feds are not relying on the roundabout design they're not relying on that to award the federal dollars, because it's a reimbursement grant as well.
I see. Ah,
So separately, I believe, and City Council has not voted
right.
to spend the money for the roundabout design. So the project as is up to this point, but through this year, is the estimate is at 92 million, and the vast majority of that is federal dollars. But what Mayor Cogswell presented to the Traffic and Transportation Committee, which full council has not voted on yet, I think the cost estimate was a little over 9 million for the roundabout design and connections, and that they were hoping that they would be able to get that money from accommodations taxes and hospitality taxes.
Wow.
So we'll see. Their December agenda just came out, and it's not on there that I could tell. So I think they won't vote on that particular portion until January. But it
And,
doesn't on the project, which is great.
right, right. And I want to back. Okay, okay. That 9 million might come from the accommodation taxes. How long do you foresee the city paying for that based off of the accommodation taxes?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Hmm.
It's they are voting on. Um, they've got some of the budget that they've
Oh
already
yeah.
voted on, and so I am not familiar with sort of the process of how that will work with adding this line item to accommodations and hospitality taxes. And I'm also I don't know this, but I'm willing to bet it wouldn't be a line item on the upcoming hospitality and accommodations taxes. I think it would be budgeted for the out years for that, if it makes sense.
That-
Because again, they're starting construction on the western side of the project, so there's time for them to
Please.
get the eastern side all sorted out.
Wow. Okay. It's speaking of sorting out. So with that roundabout, how soon would that construction start if they get the money and all this other stuff?
Yeah, and that actually they had an estimate for that at the Traffic and Transportation Committee meeting, and they were so for what they're calling the East Landing improvements, they're projecting that they wouldn't start construction on that until fiscal year 2027, which is probably how long it's going to take to actually build the bridge itself. And then remember the other things that need to get built that have been a part of this project since 2018,
Right.
upgrading some of the intersections in West Ashley so that people can get safely to and from the bridge.
Absolutely. Um, which shovel-ready project would be available right now?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, yeah. Until the bridge is actually completed, what
Mhm.
shovel-ready projects could you all put online right now to get some things started for pedestrians and bicyclists to go, to certain areas of Charleston without dealing with all of this traffic around us?
Oh, just generally across the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that's a really pertinent question, because one of the issues that's been going on for the past few years is the county and the city, all of these municipalities have been having difficulty, and the state, from what I understand as well, they've been having difficulty getting contractors to bid on projects and particularly with bike ped projects, because bike
Mm.
ped projects are cheaper and smaller. And so the contractors are all busy. They don't necessarily need to bid on these projects. So they're not, or they're submitting bids that are way too high that just don't make any sense. So we have all of these projects that we've advocated for over, I mean, I've been with Charleston Moves for I think 7 years now,
Right.
and there are projects that we've been working on and advocating for since I started that have all reached the construction stage that are just not getting bid on. It's really frustrating. I mean, I'm smiling, but it's so frustrating. So we've been sort of waiting for things like the mid block
Yeah.
pedestrian crossing on Maybank
Oh,
between the
yes.
poorhouse and the public house. That one, I think they ended up finally getting some bids for that. So hopefully that'll get awarded in the new year. The Rethink Folly Road improvements, so segment of Folly Road that would get multi-use paths and intersection crossing improvements, that went out for bid, and the county didn't receive any responses. We've got improvements over right near me in West Ashley at Sycamore and 61.
Sure.
And that was to mostly to improve the ability for pedestrians and people on bikes to cross 61, but to also get to and from the West Ashley Bikeway. That they have not been able to get bids for, I think we're going on 3 or 4 years now. So there's all this wonderful stuff that has been planned, is ready to go, and they just can't get the contractors to do it.
So the contractors, they can't find the contracts to do it. So how much does it go up as far as cost with these particular projects?
Yeah, it depends. So I know, and also, drainage is
Oh,
always a
yes.
factor. So, and drainage really influences the cost a lot. And then during the pandemic, again, what I was told was any of these projects that involved having to pipe ditches, I guess there was the supply chain with the pipes was a whole thing. So yeah, it depends on the project, whether the cost increases and by how much, and it's very contextual. So
Wow.
I know with the Maybank and Woodland Shores project,
Yes.
that cost went up, and that one also separately there was some delay on that because of property owner opposition.
Oh, yes.
And so they managed to delay the project long enough where inflation just affected the cost as well. So it timing definitely impacts the cost, not on everything, but often.
Going back, obviously, to, well, I'm not even near there yet, but down to the medical district,
Mhm.
how much has inflation affected that particular project as far as its pricing?
Um, it's so for the Ashley River Bridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so obviously the project overall, the cost has just, I mean, it's been wild to watch it just, double and then almost triple.
Mm.
And, it was the full project, including the intersection improvements, was originally supposed to be $22 million, and that was back in 2019. And so when the federal grant application was selected, it was a $22 million project, and the grant money awarded was around 18 million. So, then since then, and the pandemic obviously contributed a lot to the inflation as well. So I think we went from, the timeline, I'm botching it, but basically it felt like almost every 2 years the project doubled in cost. So it's been kind of wild, but I think, all of these agencies recognize that people can't get across the river safely. It's a major gap. Not to mention, there's just not room on the peninsula for the number of cars that people want to drive and park. And so this is a really important project, and that's, to reduce all of those impacts. And I think that's why all of these agencies and elected officials have stuck with it.
This is probably off the beaten path question that I should be asking you later on, but is there an estimate on how many people will actually use this particular bridge?
No, we don't have one, and it's hard to project that, and we've not been able to do that. I'm struggling to think of any bike ped projects locally where we've been able to do a projection of that sort. So it's also tough because, especially when you look at the Ashley River Bridge in particular, it's hard to gauge in a space that's so dangerous right now, where people are already biking and walking, and it's so dangerous, including me. I'm in the dangerous crowd, I guess. Um, how do you determine once a route is so safe and comfortable? What does that look like? How many more people would choose to use it once it's very safe? And it's just tough to project those numbers. So I don't have a projection for you, but I will say my personal opinion is I think it's going to be really, really crowded. And I think me as a daily bicycle commuter across the Ashley River, I think I'm going to end up being slightly frustrated because I'm going to be commuting in sort of a crowd. But at least it'll be finally be a safe route, and it's just going to be a beautiful project. So I think it's going to be incredibly busy, but I guess we'll see.
And going back over to West Ashley, you talked earlier about those, obviously those intersection improvements. Where can you do those right now in West Ashley?
Where can you safely bike and walk
Oh,
now?
make those intersection improvements.
Oh my gosh, almost every intersection needs improvement. So, yeah, I know, the city and the county and DOT, they were working on designs over at Stalker
Oh,
and
yes,
17. Those
sure.
haven't gone in yet. DOT did road safety audits recently that we joined them on, along 61 and along 17. You've also got the county's project for their intersection improvements on 17 in the Avondale area and then
Mm,
down near DuPont. So there's so many projects that are being designed, and they're all just sort of like they're moving through the process, and then they're just all clumping when you get to the point of needing a contractor to actually construct it. It's wild, and it's slightly outdated, just because we haven't updated it in a few weeks. But we do on our website. We have a progress map that where we are trying to track, what's in the works, what are we waiting for, what are gaps that we've identified, and so you can kind of look at that and see where everything's at. But yeah, it's just very frustrating because there's a lot of work being done and we're not physically seeing it on the
wow.
ground.
Wow. What gaps have you all identified around the proposed Ashley River bike path pedestrian bridge?
Yeah, so I think the biggest gap is the ability for people to cross Folly Road Boulevard. So, the West Ashley Greenway continues, and I don't know if a lot of people know that, although a lot of people use the Greenway, so maybe people realize it. But the Greenway keeps going all the way to, Albemarle and Portertown and everything. But you have to cross Folly Road Boulevard, and right now it's not a comfortable crossing, and it's a little frustrating because you have to go down all the way down to the light that's right by the shopping center.
Right,
You wait, and
right.
cars are still turning into you even when the light's yours. So that intersection, that's a major gap right now, and addressing that and making it comfortable for people on bike and on foot to cross it to get to the bridge in particular, but you can get to other places as well. That is part of the Ashley River Bridge project. And then, there's a key intersection along the West Ashley Greenway further into West Ashley, at Wapoo.
Right.
That's an intersection that a lot of people complain about. It's a tough one for people to cross, and people are driving too fast on Wapoo Road, and we've tried to sort of get improvements there to slow folks down, and we've not been successful. But there is, the city and the county have been working for a very long time on getting a multi-use path along Wapoo Road to connect the intersection of Savannah Highway to the West Ashley Greenway. And so part of the bridge project is also improving the actual intersection of Wapu, and the Greenway.
Mm.
And then the counties also, with their intersection work, they are looking at how you connect the Greenway with this multi-use path through the intersection at Savannah Highway to the Maryville Bikeway. So there's these major gaps to these really important pieces of infrastructure that people are using a lot now, that I think most of the planners recognize these are gaps, and there's work being done. We're just not, again, we're all getting slowed down when it gets to the actual construction part of things.
Eh, eh, So where else are people, particularly these bicyclists here in the Low Country, are using the intersections the most, and there are actually gaps there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long list. There are so many spots on James Island, so many spots on James Island, and then the Wapu Cut Bridge is a huge gap as well. And that's one of our we've tried for years to get just a study of that to figure out what we should be advocating for, and we've not been successful yet at getting that study. But yeah, I mean, we have so many gaps. There's so much work to do, and it one of the things we go out and we do bike ped counts,
Cool.
and we'll do them in places where we'll hear from people, oh, nobody walks there, nobody bikes there, and we'll go out there and we'll see 20 people in an hour in these very dangerous spots because people have to get where they need to go. So it's a long list. Honestly, I feel like an easier answer would be, where can people safely cross now? Which is so, again, I'm laughing so that I don't cry. It just is, we just have a lot of work to do. And I guess the silver lining to all of that is we've had regional plans in place that I've identified and prioritized, have a prioritization list for these gaps. And those plans are getting updated. But the other good thing is, a lot of the municipalities and then the council of governments have either completed or are getting started on their safety action plans, which again will help sort of round up on a regional scale all of these, particularly these intersections where we've got to triage it, and we've got to start really honing in on, okay, we've got to invest in this. We've got to make sure it's safe. We've got to make sure it's comfortable for folks, because there's a lot of work to do.
And over here on the peninsula, I was just over by West Edge yesterday, dropping off a food delivery on the bike, and I noticed, the little area there between, well, I guess Lockwood going on to Cannon. That seems like a little dangerous spot there if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and so another audit that we participated in with DOT was along the crosstown Septima P. Clark, and so we looked at specifically, as part of that audit, where Cannon Street is on that, and that whole split.
Sure.
They had their public meeting a couple of months ago, where people could look at the concepts that they're proposing, and it's what really needs to be done with that whole corridor and the connecting corridors like Cannon at the split and Spring too.
Sure.
What really needs to be done is, if you can't do an entire overhaul of those corridors, to really make it so that drivers through design, are driving slowly, because you're in a dense urban area. There's no reason for people to drive like they're on a highway through a dense urban area. And there's really not been interest from the people in charge to slow these streets down. And so because of that, and they're balancing their interests with, they don't want to irritate motorists, right? Like, we've got motorists who believe it is their right to drive as fast as possible when they're on the crosstown. So they're balancing those various interests. And because there's not an interest in a complete overhaul of these roadways, to me, what's most important is to focus on those intersections and make those intersections, the crossings, as narrow as they can be, so that pedestrians have a short span to cross. It also will force drivers to really pay close attention because they're kind of crunched in. And you also want to have signalization that is very, very visible and also has leading pedestrian intervals. So you're giving vulnerable people who are crossing, you're giving them some extra time to do it before drivers come at them. And getting, pavement markings on the ground, getting lighting, all of those things. The intersections are the key to corridors like Septima P. Clark Parkway and the adjacent connections and splits like at Cannon. The other big one is we need the Haygood extension. That's
Okay.
really important. And so for people who don't know what that proposal is, where Haygood intersects with Spring Street,
Cool.
essentially, that needs to be a mid-block, really an extension of the street grid, but I don't know that that's possible. So bare minimum, it should be an extension of the grid for people biking and walking to get across Spring at that, right by Mel's Ghost Bike.
Right.
To get over there and get over to the medical district and the hotel that's proposed for right there,
Cool.
and cut through and make it a new grid for vulnerable road users. And that would do several things. One, it would get people safely to the CARTA stop that's right there. And I'm sure lots of people have seen people just booking it across this mid-block area because they're trying to get to the bus stop, or they're trying to get to the other side of MUSC, or they're just trying to get home. That crossing is so important to get that in place so that we're slowing motorists down, forcing them to pay better attention, and providing more of a grid network for people on bikes and on foot and using assistive devices. So, yeah, that was a long answer, but there's just that's a good example of there's just a lot of work that needs to be done, and the agencies know it, and they are doing their best to examine these different things. But they also, there's only so much time in a day, and there's only so much funding that they are awarded for bike ped improvements. So.
And how much funding is available for all of these proposed, areas that you want to get fixed?
It depends. There's a lot of funding sources. So with the road safety audits that SCDOT does, that funding is federal funding that is then distributed to the states. So it's a fund that's the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and then it's a pot of money within that program for vulnerable road user safety. And South Carolina is one of the most dangerous places in the nation for everybody who's driving, everybody who's using the streets. So one of the things that SCDOT did a few years ago was they developed a complete streets directive, but they also developed a statewide pedestrian and bicycle safety action plan. And they were able to, from there, develop a list of priorities of areas where they needed to focus, like physical areas where they needed to focus in the state. So the road safety audits are a part of that. So they've been doing road safety audits on the corridors throughout the state with the highest crash rates. So locally, it's been the Crosstown, Folly Road, a portion of Savannah Highway, a portion of 61, Dorchester Road, Ashley Phosphate.
Oh, yeah.
Meeting, King, St. Philip, and Calhoun.
Oh, yes.
And I'm confident I'm forgetting one, but they've been undertaking that work. But again, back to your original question, there's limited funding through that vulnerable road user safety program. So they're not doing everything that they could be doing to improve the safety of those corridors. They're doing what makes sense within a cost benefit analysis because they have limited funding. And then you've also got, again, money that's funneled from the feds to the states. It's called the Transportation Alternatives Program. And the BCD COG handles part of that funding, and then SCDOT handles the other part of it, generally for the rural areas. And so that's an opportunity for the municipalities to get funding for their bike ped projects uh, depending on the year, and there's a limited amount of money through that as well. And then, of course, you've got all of the municipalities and the county. Like the county still has their transportation sales tax program. Also, they get an allocation of the state's gas tax that they can use
Yes.
for bike ped and transit improvements. So it's a hodgepodge of funding, and there never seems to be enough.
Yikes. Oh, and I've witnessed a lot of situations at St. Philip and Calhoun as well with some accidents there. So that's a very dangerous spot. But where else, with this limited funding, where else can you go to actually get money to help with improve these situations here in these locations?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we end up doing helping with federal grant
Mm,
applications, because you've
sure.
got all of these discretionary funding programs that are very competitive at the federal level.
Mm,
So that's why, I mean, people are probably like, "Ugh, Charleston Moves has become obsessed with federal grants," but we have a limited amount of funding through all these other sources. So we really we try to help the municipalities and the county target that to the best of their ability with these really major projects that fill major gaps. So it's an option. Under the Biden administration, they bulked up those competitive grant programs, but it they're competitive. So it's tough to get the money, and it's why we get sort of obsessive when we're helping with a grant. We get obsessive about collecting letters of support, because these programs are not the public is not as aware of them, of these programs. So when you can get a lot of letters of support, it's exciting for the federal reviewers, and they see, oh, there's a broad swath of community support. This is really interesting. They don't see that a lot with these grant applications. So that's why we focus tremendously on that. For the Ashley River Bridge, I think the successful year, we ended up getting 222 letters. And that's not from individuals, it's from elected officials, businesses, nonprofits, neighborhoods, all of the basically organizations representing large groups of people. And for Better North Bridge, I just started collecting letters for the next round, but the last round, I think we ended up with 180 letters of support. So it's good. It's good. It just they're competitive.
yes, ma'am. Speaking of which, I wanted to get back to that. I want to get back to you before I lose that interest there. But with that grant application that the county just submitted, how much are they asking from, I guess, the federal government?
Yeah, so they haven't submitted it yet. The deadline is January 30th.
Okay.
And this time around, it's going to be a planning grant rather than a capital
Mm.
grant, which is still helpful if it's awarded. There's the county has not identified the sort of delta in the cost for the Better North Bridge. So the project cost itself has increased over the years, and the award amount that's been available from the federal government through this program has decreased over the years. So we've reached a point now where the project probably costs 55 million at this point, and the max award amount for a capital grant is 25 million. So the county hasn't identified the difference. So they're going to go for a planning grant instead. And I think the planning grant amount will probably be for 8 million. And that way they can, I mean, and it's not just, sitting around and drawing up designs. It includes the pre-construction documents,
Oh, yes.
going for permitting, pretty much everything that you can do leading up to right-of-way acquisition and construction. If they're awarded this grant and they can get started on all that planning work, that gives us time to identify the missing construction funding.
What is that missing construction funding now?
So it would be, well, I guess that's a good question. So I got to redo my math. So, sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet. So
I haven't
the
had my green tea yet, so you're okay.
So the county staff pointed out to me this week that the other helpful thing with the planning grant is because we'll get all of the details really set, that will identify exactly how much construction is going to cost. So right now it's just an estimate, and
Right.
the estimate for the project is 55 million. I don't know. I don't think that's only construction,
Right.
but the if we're able to get this grant and assess all of it, then we'll know the exact number that we need to go for construction.
And I'm probably going ahead of myself, and I really truly need to get more and equipped about this as far as obviously getting educated about it. But how many design drawings are there right now for the Better North Bridge project?
There's only the conceptual, basically the route alternatives
Mm,
that the consultants put out to the public to review. So, and the county had never ended up picking which route design they wanted to go for. So the public greatly preferred that conceptual plan that you've seen, where it's just and it's super conceptual. It's a very pretty design, but it's just it would start at Northbridge Park in West Ashley, and it would go over the halfway across the river, and then it would split. So
mm,
you'd have one part going under the existing North Bridge over to the Greenbelt property that City of North Charleston now owns. And then you'd have the other segment going over to the old Baker Hospital property that the county owns. And that way you're avoiding the interstate, the off ramps,
sure.
but you're also accommodating more people on the North Charleston side. So, like, if you live in Dorchester Terrace and you want to get on this bridge, you shouldn't have to go all the way to the old Baker Hospital site. It should be an easy add-on for you to go. So that was the one that the public greatly preferred. That's the design I prefer. But that being said, those are the only designs that exist right now. Are those sort of like, where would this thing go? Drawings. They've not been engineered out. They've not been, nothing like that. So again, this planning grant could be extremely helpful.
I hate to get political or even, personal, but do you believe, and I know you have to be extremely unbiased with this, but do you believe the county's still interested in this particular project?
I do. Yes, I do. I know that there's a couple of folks at the county who have not ever liked the project, but I believe they're in the minority. And I've not surveyed every
Right.
single county person, but I do believe the majority of county council and the majority of staff are very interested in and supportive of this project, which makes sense because obviously they're seeing people trying to cross the existing bridge now. They're seeing. I mean, that's horrific to watch. The fact that we've allowed that to go on for so long, people are just trying to get where they need to go, and they have to risk their lives to do it. That's we should have solved this a long time ago. But the other thing to remember is the county has actually been working on this since at least 2008 and probably before then, because when the bridge was built in the 1950s and then when it was widened in the 1970s, they took the sidewalk away. And so since the 1970s, this has been an issue. So in around 2008, the county did a feasibility study to figure out what makes sense to solve this. And so that's where the separate bike ped bridge idea came from, out of those feasibility studies. So it's not like this isn't like some project that Charleston Moves invented. We pulled it off the shelf from their studies and have been advocating for it. So I think most of the county gets that, and they want to solve this.
Oh shoot! I'm so sorry. Zoom is only giving me 1 minute, but let me
Okay.
ask you in 20 seconds: have they been since this time and since this project has obviously been developing, obviously looked at as far as certain things that could be added and whatnot? Do you believe that they have actually done a new feasible study since then?
They have not well, I'm sorry, that's not true. The the one that went out to the public, basically to review the conceptual routes and what the preliminary impacts would be. So they've done a little bit of that, but it was focused on the separate bike ped bridge analysis that, and again, the old analysis looked at a ton of different options, not a separate bridge, and ultimately decided, oh, the separate bridge is the most feasible from an engineering perspective, a cost perspective at that time, and politically. So, yeah, there's been minor updates.
Katie Zimmerman with Charleston Moves. Thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close Up, sponsored by Rebellion Roads.
Thanks.
Thank you.